This is an unusual day in that no one has posted any questions in advance, and you're the only one here. So, um, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to talk about, it's all yours.
I thought a question before coming here. My question was, what is direct knowledge, and how can we understand when we comprehend something with direct knowledge? And also, can scientific reasoning allow us to know something with direct knowledge, like a phenomenon? Can we know a phenomenon with direct knowledge? Yeah, by the explanation of science.
Sure. The term you're using, direct knowledge, is an interesting one. It's very, I like its descriptive quality. I'm just curious where you started using that term.
I've seen it in Buddhist scriptures. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the best source, at least for most things, not for everything. Yes. Well, I think that what would be something different than direct knowledge? Obviously, indirect knowledge, and which I would say would be something that is arrived at only through logic and reason and is not based on experience. Indirect knowledge can extend to the application of logic and reason to limited experience, and trying to put intellectual interpretations on limited experiences. That would still be indirect knowledge. And I think what ultimately we're referring to here in the context of Buddhism as direct knowledge is what would be referred to as knowledge or wisdom, right? And has come to be referred to in English as insight, although that's led to insight itself being conflated with a particular way of using attention that can lead you to insight. But yeah, I think the essence of direct knowledge is it derives from experience. It is an understanding of some aspect of the world that is based on a person's own direct experience. And it is qualitatively very different than something that's a purely intellectual understanding. The realm of physics, for example, is filled with all kinds of things that are more or less experientially incomprehensible, yet you can follow the logic of these things right through, right? So that's an example. And we could come up with many others. Of course, philosophy maybe being one of the prominent areas where we have somebody presenting, this is the way it is, and their logic and reason about how they arrived at that, and half a dozen other somebodies saying, yeah, but I applied logic and reason to it and came up with something different. And it's all just a demonstration of the truth of Gödel's theory that all that logic and reason are ever going to do is give you a product based on your starting assumptions, and that you must always have some starting assumptions. You can never, direct knowledge can never extend to the point of not including some assumptions as the moment that you begin the process of applying logic and reason to it. So, but this is what we're all after here. We're after these experiences that provide us with wisdom, and direct knowledge, with the kind of knowledge or wisdom that's being referred to by the Buddha. And so we can look at the way these are, the summarized versions of these: no self, emptiness, the truth of suffering, um, the truth of dependent arising or codependent arising. We can look at all of these, and logically, we can decide that we think we know what that's about, but it will be based on assumptions, both those that we are aware of, but many that we're not aware of. And in terms of our trying to understand that, we're drawing upon resources that may or may not be valid. So we have all kinds of different people that understand what impermanence is all about, or emptiness is all about, and they disagree with each other. But those whose understanding of impermanence or emptiness is based on experience, then this is the kind of direct knowledge where they're all in agreement with each other, regardless of what system of practice that they come from or anything else. I think is a very good criteria for evaluating whether your understanding is approaching that of an understanding based primarily in direct experience as direct knowledge. Because as I mentioned, even with limited experience, we're still trying to interpret that using logic and reason. So we haven't yet arrived at direct knowledge until the quality of the experience that we're basing this on has reached a certain threshold. And it can continue to develop beyond that threshold. But if we're looking for a way to evaluate whether our understanding, to what degree it's derived, it is based in what you might call direct knowledge, does it allow us to see how this kind of knowledge is in any valid spiritual tradition, and any spiritual tradition that has persisted over a long period of time, and where very, very wise and profound people have discussed and written about this. If you can begin to bridge the gap between Christianity and Islam and Buddhism and all the different Indian schools of thought and things like that, if you can see where the Zen masters and the Tibetan masters and so forth are addressing the same thing, you'll know that you're approaching that kind of wisdom that the Buddha referred to as direct knowledge, because your understanding is coming into consensus with others who are widely believed to have achieved that same kind of direct knowledge. You see what I'm saying? Where it becomes a bit misleading is there's an assumption that we're going to go from ignorance to a place of perfect direct knowledge or wisdom. And we're approaching that asymptotically, right? You know what I mean by asymptotically?
Not really.
We're approaching that ever closer. Because an asymptotic line is one that goes up and it's approaching this vertical axis, and it gets close, infinitely closer, 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 but it never quite reaches it.
Yes.
So the perfection of wisdom is a goal, but it's a goal that that it's a big mistake to think we'll ever reach, because there's always a little bit more understanding that can be had.
So like even the Buddha didn't had all the understanding of the world?
That's right. Even if you look at the suttas and the way his teaching evolved, you can see that his understanding continued to deepen, and especially it began to deepen as he was conveying this information to more and more people. because he began to see more and more ways that what he did understand could be confused. And in the process of overcoming that, his own understanding became clearer, right?
Yeah, but I started to think that like the knowledge we gain from science is not very necessary for enlightenment, because like, you know, these experiments weren't conducted in the Buddha's time. Like there are many experiments and the Buddha didn't see them. So
They're not, but uh, they're not essential, but they sure can be helpful because they're obviously going to be pointing to the same thing. Science is a very different way, focused on the material instead of the mental. It's a different way of trying to come closer and closer to this direct knowledge. In that case, in the case of science, it's direct knowledge of the physical world, the living world, so forth. Yeah. But so the two can be very, very valuable in conjunction with each other. But but science is not essential to this process. Although, and this is just my own speculation, if the Buddha had somehow had access to the scientific knowledge that we have today, perhaps his the quality of his wisdom could have been even greater, and he might have been an even more effective teacher. That's just my speculation. Now, go ahead, Elizabeth. Yes.
Why don't you finish and I'll come in, because you may
Okay.
be about to go where I was going.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just about to. I just wanted to say that there, especially with Buddhism as a religion, there are people who very much want the Buddha to represent the epitome, the perfection of wisdom, the point beyond which there's no place else to go. As a matter of fact, this is even the name of that culminating stage that's in the Vajrayana tradition that's called the no more learning. But, and people become very attached to this idea that they're going to somehow become as perfect as they can be. And they can, and as a part of that, they'll have some sort of tremendous omniscience and things like that. But in my experience, I've come to the place, and I think anybody will who thinks about it carefully. They would much rather, I would much rather believe that if I live another day or another month or another year, I will learn even more than I have. I would much prefer that.
yes, this, I think I've seen a sutta about this, like Buddha went to a seclusion for 2 months, and he said after he came back, he said like I've taught what, how can I like this person feels after like in this mental state, like I think it was something about the mental state of his students. Yeah.
Right.
So like it seems that he had this knowledge at this time, like after declaring he's a Buddha.
That's right. Yes, I think I know the sutta you're referring to. He came out of that retreat wiser than he went in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you wanted to say something, please.
Yeah, just that I think, what we learn with this contemplative path, these techniques, that's one way of observing our experience. And it teaches a lot about how our perceptions are put together. It teaches us much about the world. Science is a different way at looking at experience and at looking at the world. And science builds by researchers coming up with a hypothesis, testing it, comparing their results with others. And that's another way knowledge builds. And so, I think it's a mistake to think that our contemplative path is going to give us some of the answers that science looks for. And science has a very hard time at looking directly at some of the things people experience in meditation. At this point in time, there are scientists beginning to work with meditators and trying to discover, are there things that we can do together? Can we understand something about what's happening in the body and in the brain when people do these practices? But, you know, there's a difference, and sometimes people make a mistake of that if I get good enough at meditation, if I can do some of these states, then I'll know something about what I should do best for my health, what I should do best in terms of medicine, how to cure my cancer. You know, these things support an awful lot of what can be done, but it's a mistake to replace what else we can learn from science and other ways of investigating. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think like there are many types of scientific knowledge. Like in some types, like we just observe a phenomenon, like just the apple falls down, and just try to model this with mathematical concepts. And in some of them, like we came up with a hypothesis, as you said. And yeah, like I think. Yeah, I think it depends on the knowledge, but I think like the science has a purpose to understand the world, and I think it's similar to what religion offers to us. Like in both, we try to understand the world, but yeah, but the methods are different.
Yeah, the methods are different, and often I think, you know, just try to see them as complements, as opposed where the most errors seem to get made is when people think just one is appropriate and the other has nothing to give me. So if I were to say only religious matters, there's nothing science can teach me, I'd be losing help. If I were to say only science matters and there's nothing spirituality or contemplation or anything like that can add, I'd also be losing. And so I think it's you know, it's more to say, I don't want to assume one of these has all the answers and the other has nothing.
Yes, like I got it. Like you are saying, all like the science and religion are like, I mean, the practices we are doing in Buddhism try to eliminate some another unknown thing, like yeah. I didn't express it well, but I think I got you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's okay.
Yes.
Morning, Vlad and Bill. Well, it's morning for me. I'm not sure what time it is for you.
Morning, Culadasa.
So hope you're both well. We didn't have any questions posted when the time that I logged in here. So we were answering one that Ahmet brought up. So either of you have something you'd like to talk about, please jump right in.
Yeah, I may ask a question if you don't mind. Something on my mind. How would you recommend approaching addictions, which I understand are forms of strong craving? So, for example, let's say psychological addiction to smoking marijuana, maybe on the weekends. So it's not something that is detrimental to my life so much that I need to seek professional help, because it's not all the time. But still, I consider myself a serious practitioner. I still have a regular meditation practice. It does not interfere with regularity of it, but one part of my mind understands that there are some negative effects on the quality of my mindfulness, for example, in those days, and in the quality of meditation. But still, another part enjoys it so much that I still experience strong cravings. So I'm just wondering, should I approach it just like any other craving and just continue practicing and trying to be mindful? Or in this case, should maybe another course of action be taken? What, maybe you have some experience in this area or something like this?
Well, as with so many things, if we, I mean, you use the term addiction, and then you describe something that doesn't have very much of a physiological component to it, the way that there are other drugs, alcohol and opiates and things like that, produce a much greater physiological dependence.
Mhm.
So it gets to be a vague thing, and this can extend into all kinds of things. You can regard checking your email or checking your text messages as being a time-wasting habit that is unproductive and undesirable, and that you would perhaps be better off without. All kinds of things like that. There are people that follow the news in a way that, to me, is it falls into that category. What I try to do with myself is just different aspects of my behavior, bring as much mindfulness to them as possible. I've come to find that there's no aspect of my behavior that I don't learn something important by examining. And whereas through the influences of other people or through the influences of attitudes that I've developed, I may look at something that some aspect of my behavior as, oh, this must be negative because there are other people that believe this is negative. In mindfully observing myself, I might come to a different conclusion. And it's the other way around. There are things that other people might say, oh, that's fine. That's a good way to be. And I look into them more deeply, and I find that they're arising out of something that really isn't that healthy. And so what I'm saying is, if any aspect of your behavior enters into your consciousness as something that might or might not be less wholesome or more wholesome than you think it is, observe it, open yourself up to it, see what it has to tell you. Try to let go of whatever bias made you interested in observing it in the first place. It got you to the place of, oh, this is something I'd better more closely observe my use of marijuana on the weekends, right? That's where you are. So do that, observe it with vipassana. Instead of just seeing what you've always seen in terms of those behaviors, look carefully, look beyond that, see what's really happening in the moment. When you decide to use the marijuana, in the hours and moments leading up to that, how much of that is habit? Just plain old ordinary, well, I always do this on this time on Saturday, or about this time on the weekend. I don't even necessarily want to, but I do it because it's what I always do every weekend. There's all kinds of things that you might find, but open yourself up to seeing what's really going on. As the most potent way of overcoming any problematic behavior is recognizing its problematic nature, recognizing its cost to you versus the benefit that you derive from it. Now, there's got to be a benefit or you wouldn't do it. But is there a cost? And is that cost, is that cost justified in terms of the benefit? Where does this habit have its roots? By indulging in this, am I reinforcing something that I would rather not be a part of how my psyche operates? Right? So there's nothing necessarily wrong with the thing you're doing, but there may be something wrong with the reason you're doing it and the consequences of doing it for that reason. You might be smoking marijuana, or maybe you eat it, I don't know. You might be using marijuana in order to keep yourself from experiencing something else that would otherwise dominate your weekend time when you don't have to work, or whatever the reason is you don't do it during the week. Wouldn't you like to know that? Knowing that, you can always ask yourself, well, is there something else I can do with regard to that need? Is there a better way to satisfy it? Or is there a way just to eliminate that as a need altogether? Or is this the best way? And maybe it is. Well, then maybe let me see how I can best incorporate this particular behavior into my life so that whatever its negative impact is, I minimize that. You already know this has a negative impact. It affects your clarity of mind for actually days after you. If you use it only on the weekend, you're still going to be experiencing some degree of the effect of it on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
So your meditations only get really clear on Thursday and Friday. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. It helps a lot. I was just one thing I thought about. It's the fifth precept. I was thinking I should take it much more seriously because it's a way of numbing the mind, and it has an effect of on decreasing mindfulness, and that's why I thought maybe I should approach it differently. For example, in different way than like craving for chocolate, because you eat chocolate, you enjoy it, but then there's no after effects on meditation after that. So yeah, I will take all of that into account, what you said. Thank you.
I'd like to speak to something else about the precepts, about the fifth precept, but it's true of all the precepts.
Mhm.
You could just take them and look at them and say, oh, this is numbing the mind. And therefore it's not consistent with the fifth precept. And therefore I'd better stop. And you put all your information, all of your energy and intention and everything into stopping doing it. And two possibilities. One is that you'll succeed in stopping doing it, but you won't really be any wiser than you were before. And the other one is you won't be able to stop doing it. You'll beat yourself up. You'll feel bad. You'll rationalize. You'll go through all kinds of mental gymnastics of self-punishment all the way through to self-justification, and you still won't be any wiser. The point of all of these precepts is to examine your behavior. What are its consequences on you and on others, right? Both negative and positive consequences. And try to understand those more than you did before. The other aspect of that is, why are you doing it? This is what I was also telling you a few minutes ago. It may be that the consequences of the behavior aren't that bad. The cost isn't that great. The benefit is real, but it's coming from a place that it shouldn't be coming from. See, so the precepts can be an extremely powerful practice for increasing your understanding, transforming yourself, becoming a better person in many ways. Like, for example, just doing what you want with your life more effectively. But you do this by examining that carefully in terms of both its consequences to others and to yourself, and in terms of what is motivating that, because that also has consequences. If you're doing it for unwholesome reasons, you're reinforcing an aspect of your mind and character that you wouldn't want to be. If it's arising out of craving and you reinforce it by doing it all the time, you're going to be more subject to craving to do other things. If you're doing out of some form of self-clinging, every time you repeat it, you are reinforcing that self-clinging origin of other behaviors, not just this one. So the point of the precepts is an extremely powerful practice. If all you do is say, oh, this is a divinely dispensed rule, I better follow it, you might do fewer things that are not good for you and not good for others, but that will be the limit of it. You won't learn from it. You won't be transformed as a result of practicing the precepts.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
You're welcome. So, hello, Rahul. Glad to have you join us.
Hi, Culadasa. Glad to be here.
Good. So we're just taking anybody's questions or anybody's topics for discussion today. So if you have anything to offer, please do so.
I don't have a question, but just an update from the last time we talked, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, just for the background, I have been meditating for like using TMI for around 4 years, and I was like in a plateau somewhere in the fourth stage, and I've been in that stage for a very long time. And that was the point of our discussion last time. So I think since then, one of the things that I found out was, was about the right view. I really sensed that I didn't have the right view generally about interactions and people. So internally, somehow I was demonizing everybody who was giving me a negative opinion or telling something or doing something bad to me. I was seeing them as a separate self and demonizing them in some way. And I think since I have started looking at all of this as a process, um, I wouldn't say that my meditation has improved, but I think generally in life, I think I have started to develop a much more positive attitude, and that is slowly starting to reflect in my meditations also. So I think that was something very crucial that I missed for all these years that should have been there, the right view towards processes or people. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yes, that is, I think that that's really wonderful. I would describe that in terms of the Eightfold Path, I would describe that as being the second part of the Eightfold Path. The first being the cognitive, which interacts with the conative. The conative is what your intentions are, what your views of the world are that uh, that guide your understanding. These arise from right understanding, the first part of the Eightfold Path. But their manifestation and the way they manifest, right thought and intention, or right views of others, things like that, which you were talking about. So what this is you are refining through your understanding of the Dharma and through your understanding that is arising from your meditation practice. You're using both of those to refine the way you apply these in the world to the situations you find yourself in, situations that involve other people. Does that sound like a good way of positioning what you've learned and what you're applying?
Yeah, I think that's more of an internal understanding of, um, that these are not to take it all personally, but think of all of them as processes and see that, they have their own internal processes that has led to what they are, and all the negativity or all those emotions that are directed towards you are not them speaking, but a process speaking. I mean, I'm trying to view it like that so that I keep myself always objective.
That's great. That's wonderful. What you're seeing is the person that they are in the moment that they do something. Instead of viewing it only from your perspective, recognizing it from the Dharma perspective, that what they are in that moment and what they do in that moment is the result of causes and conditions, right? And you can
Yes.
easily extend that to viewing yourself in a much more wholesome way as well. That what you are in any given moment and what you do is a result of causes and conditions. This is very empowering because whatever you do in response to what arises is going to be the causes and conditions for who you are and what you are in the next moment and the next and the next and the next. This is our point of power in this, where we can modify who we are going to be going forward by modulating our behaviors in the present.
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's really very empowering because exactly as you said, you yourself put uh, I myself put myself into that causes and conditions framework, and it becomes very easy to forgive yourself for whatever you want to forgive yourself.
Now, you're far less potent in making changes in someone else, but you can nudge them in the right direction. How you respond to something they do to you can either reinforce the other causes and conditions which led them to behave that way. And a simple example of that is you respond with anger, right? Uh, or you can respond in a different way and have a different result. Maybe make them examine themselves, their actions and their motivations for it. Now, you're much more limited in the influence you can have on other people, but you can have an influence. Everything you do is going to have an impact on others. So I'll just add that to what you already said.
Yes. And I heard you talking about the precepts. Unfortunately, I do not know about it. If it's okay, would you like to elaborate on that? Like what the precepts are? And...
Okay, yes. Well, the precepts, things like not not killing other beings, or sometimes by extension, not intentionally causing unnecessary harm to other beings, not engaging in not stealing, not taking things that aren't freely given, not engaging in false speech or harsh speech or divisive speech, wrong speech, not engaging in sexual misconduct, and the one that Vlad mentioned earlier, not using substances or engaging in activities that produce dullness of mind, that impair your mindfulness and your ability to apply your practice and your wisdom and your understanding to your daily life. I think that's all 5 of them. Cover them all? Yeah. Okay. So did you get that? So we just simply do not killing, not lying, not stealing, not causing harm through your sexual behavior, and not dulling your own mind. Okay. So those are the precepts. Got it?
Yes. Thank you.
So these are really powerful guidelines as tools. They're not very potent as 5 commandments. Thou shalt not. Because like I was saying, that will at least modify your behavior in a positive way, but to a very limited extent, and can result in a lot of self-chastising and harmful things that you do as a result of trying to follow them as rules but not succeeding. Far more valuable is to regard them as a practice, to examine all of your behaviors. And after all, the only reason what is the only reason that we lie or steal or any of these other things? We're doing it out of craving, and we're doing it out of somehow it's going to be a benefit to ourselves. We lie in order to keep from suffering the consequences of something we've done, all of this kind of stuff. So these precepts, by examining your actions, using these precepts as a guideline to what is more wholesome and what is less wholesome, we can get in contact with, they become a powerful means to get in contact with our own craving, our own self-clinging, our own failures to try to predict the consequence on ourselves and others of our behaviors. So the precepts are a very powerful tool for that. Unfortunately, in most of the Buddhist world, they're regarded the same way as the Christian 10 Commandments or, the things like this. Just only as rules of behavior, and they're not used as such a powerful practice as they really can be.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'm happy to answer any more questions or comment on anything else that
Maybe I can ask one more question about this conditioning. Um, I have noticed some mental conditioning in my meditations. Like sometimes I just draw myself back from a sensation automatically. Like just after my attention goes it, I take myself back automatically, and I can't change this. I think it has been causing a problem for me because like it makes it hard to watch the sensations. So like my question is, what can we do about subtle conditions, like about the mental behaviors?
Yeah. So if I understand, what you're talking about in general are things that your mind tends to do during your meditation that are counterproductive to the meditation itself. Okay. And if I further understand correctly, the problem that you see is you want to stop these mental behaviors so that your meditation will be better, but your attempts to stop it don't work.
I didn't make an attempt because like I know it's just a momentary act. Like, so what can I do?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't even have the ability in the moment that it happens to do something about it. Okay. But nevertheless, you still want it not to happen. Right. Bill, you had something to add?
I was just curious whether or not this was a startle response or something else.
A good question.
What kind of response? Sorry.
Is it because something happens and you're startled by it?
Like I didn't know this verb. Startle.
Unexpected.
Unexpected.
Get kind of scared.
No, like it's not being scared, but I think I have some bad experiences with trying to focus on sensations. So like I think it has been caused by these past experiences. Maybe, yeah.
Good. That is great clarification. So, yeah. So the behavior of your mind that you're talking about, and we were talking about in very general terms before. Now we can get more specific. Is your meditation is taking you somewhere, and your mind doesn't want to go there. It's saying, "Whoops, no." Right. Yes. Then you have to approach this in a slightly different way than you have been. It's, not liking it happening is, as you've learned, all that does is make you feel bad about it happening. Isn't that the whole second arrow thing? Isn't that what the second noble truth is about? Something happens, you don't want it that way. So you have aversion, and you also have a desire for it to be different. And as a result of that, you suffer not only because of the thing that your mind does, but you suffer because you don't want it to happen, the aversion, and you want your mind to behave differently, the desire. Look at it in that way. Open yourself up to it. Accept, okay, this is the way my mind does this. Acknowledge it. And so what do you do then? Open yourself up to the examination of it. Don't push it away and reject it. Allow it to be there. So acknowledge, accept, and allow, and learn from it. It is only going to change on the basis of some kind of learning taking place in those unconscious parts of your mind, right? Whatever it is in your past experience that makes you withdraw from some place that your meditation practice is taking you, that is important. You don't want to make it go away. You want to discover what it is so that all of the other parts of your mind can integrate this into who and what you are. Now it will become a source of understanding. It will eventually cease to be a problem.
Also,
Yes.
Do you have any advice on how to stimulate interest about to examine? Like I don't, I have tried to examine it, but like I didn't have the motivation to do this always. Like there is, I think the intention to do this like isn't, I cannot form this. Like my mind, like it's almost, my mind doesn't want this.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're identifying with the reaction. You're not examining it objectively. To be interested in it, to be curious about it, requires that you stand back, you take a higher perspective, you allow it to be there as an object of observation. Okay? When you identify with it, instead of it becoming an objective relationship, when it becomes an identification relationship, you are your mind's reaction to this thing. You cannot look at your mind's reaction. I mean, right now, can you see your, well, you've got a camera on, but if you didn't have a camera on, right now, you couldn't see your own face, right? Well, that's what it's like. When you identify with something, you can't see it. You have to make it separate. You have to use a camera or a mirror in order to examine it. So don't identify with it. Any way that you can find to adopt an objective relationship to it. It can be as simple as the way you verbalize the experience. If you say, I am such and such, try to change that verbally to such and such is arising. Aversion to this particular thing is arising, right? Not my mind is withdrawing, but the tendency to withdraw is there. It has arisen. Let me look at it. Now you're putting it into that objective perspective. Elizabeth?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be curiosity about the thing where your mind doesn't want to go. It can be curiosity about this process of aversion, and it can be trying to come up with equanimity about aversion arising. What, I don't want to go there. What does that feel like? Where is it in your body? What kind of images are there? What kind of words are in your head? And be curious about that. And be curious to just see what's going on, not to make it go away. It's not to make the aversion go away. It doesn't mean that you ever have to deal with the thing that you're averse to. It's just because even just learning about this process of aversion will have application many other places in your life. So it isn't about necessarily even ever dealing with the thing that you don't want to go to. It's, can I understand this process of wanting not to go there?
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense? That it doesn't have to, and again, you know, to equanimity, can I be okay with the fact that I'm averse to this, even if I don't want to be curious right now? I can't get close enough even to be curious about the process of aversion, but can I be okay with the fact that I don't want to go there? Even that, you know, very small steps start making a huge difference with stuff like this.
Yeah.
And it's okay, you know, all of us have areas of our conditioning that are very conditioned or traumatic, and it may not be the time or place to go there now. It may not be the time or place to go there for a long time. It may not be ever. Mm-hmm. But one of the secrets is just to be okay with that. I can be equanimous with the thing, the fact that this arises, because then at least I'm not adding feeling bad on top of it.
Yeah. This is all described in a fair bit of detail in the chapter on stage 4 under the heading of distractions have strong emotional content. So you might want to refer to that section. This is that description and those instructions don't just apply to stage 4. They apply to the rest of your life. And by following through on them, you'll get better and better and better at dealing with all kinds of things, of even recognizing things that were previously too subtle for you to recognize. So it'll never stop being an approach that serves you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ricardo. Glad you could join us. So we're just taking questions from anyone and everyone right now. So if you have anything that you'd like to talk about, please bring it up.
If no one has anything else, I'll throw one out. So last night, about once a month, Michael Taft does a traditional Buddhist remembrance of death practice. And I wondered if you had any suggestions for doing that in context of TMI. It sort of relates, it fits in well with some of the things about mindfulness and that appendix.
Since I'm not familiar with what Michael does, maybe you could just briefly describe it.
It's generally meditation. The ritual part of it is everyone who's coming calls on someone or bringing people that we know or love to have died into with us. Mm-hmm. And then there's a long meditation, which is basically imagining your own death. Mm-hmm. The actual description, he does quite a number of different things. Every month is different. But the whole purpose of this is going back to the original Buddhist inspiration of one of the things that inspired the Buddha was, oh my God, people die. Mm-hmm. And a lot of there were a lot of early practices about dealing with remembering that you're going to die, sitting in cemeteries, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so he's building on those traditions to say one of the things that happens in contemporary society is that we don't want to deal with death. We gloss over death. We talk about people having passed away. We try to make it nice, as opposed to realizing that we will lose our loved ones and that we ourselves will die. And just sort of bringing that knowledge into our practice in various ways. So that's one of the things that he's doing. And so much about, the mindful review and things like that seems similar in terms of, especially if there are events in the world or in our lifetimes, to then bring that mindfulness to them rather than not being mindful of something.
Okay. Well, you're right. This is absolutely about mindfulness. And the flip side of this kind of mindfulness is the way we can unmindfully avoid confronting death and our own death, the death of others, by extension, any and every kind of loss, that we can unconsciously shy away from looking at that. And that creates a vacuum within our mindfulness. Is a very important part of mindfulness that we're not looking at. I would agree with you that this is something, since in one form or another, death is often a part of our lives. This could very much be a part of mindful review when that comes up in your life, to mindfully review your reactions and responses to whatever it was that brought death into your consciousness. Another place that that might come up is in a part of loving kindness meditation, because especially the older we get, the more likely that some of the people that we were closest to, some of the people that helped us most in our own journey, things like that, are no longer alive. And that's another opportunity to incorporate that into a wider understanding of the reality of death, the reality of loss of every kind. We are all going to die. And unless a piano falls on our head or something like that, we're also going to be injured and be sick and get old. Our senses are going to fail us. Our bodies are going to fail us. There's going to be more pain. These are all inevitable. There's going to be the increase in pain in your body is a loss of comfort in your body. The loss of vision and hearing and tactile sensitivity and all this other stuff, loss of balance, loss of muscle strength, being more vulnerable and more prone to injuries and diseases. This is all a part of life. You know, we come up, we reach a peak, we plateau, and then it's downhill. Large part of our life is we're walking around as gradually decaying corpses already, you know. Now, I didn't explicitly include this as a practice in TMI, but it could certainly be incorporated. I think probably it's something that could be maybe as an appendix and then introduced very early on. Now, the way that I used death meditation for years in my practice personally was to vividly imagine my own death, including imagining the people that were close to me at that particular time in my life, what they might say about me, and imagine them speaking about me after my death, either at my funeral or in discussions with each other, things like that. And the most powerful effect that this had on me, I think there was an increasing acceptance of the inevitability of my own death, because on these occasions, I was intentionally examining that. You know, I would make it very vivid. I would imagine myself being told that I had that there was something that was going to cause my death imminently, whether I was going to be executed in the morning at sunrise, or whether I had a disease that was going to kill me in like pancreatic cancer, you've got 2 weeks to live, sorry, something like that. So it helped me to get used to and accept death as an inevitable part of my life. But the biggest, most noticeable effect that it had on me was I'd come out of those meditations and I would look at what I'm doing today and yesterday and planning to do tomorrow and say, wow, this puts that all in a totally different perspective. Is this what I really want to do tomorrow? Is this what I really want to do the rest of today? Is that the best I could have done yesterday? Right. Mm-hmm. So that was the most immediate and powerful effect of those practices. And they served me very well. I got a lot of benefit from them, a lot of advantage from them, and be well worth including. So I'm not, maybe you could cue me or direct me towards another discussion of something as it relates to the practice that you do with Michael Taft.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. I mean, it's often the imagery of either speaking to others or as you're dying, or what happens afterwards as part of his imagery. So that's in common. I find both that thought of when you come back and are here, there is that, how do I want to spend my time? There is a renewed appreciation of even simple things, of just sights and sounds, and going for a walk and looking at the plants, or the dog of the neighbors or whatever. And again, it varies, but oftentimes there's just a renewed appreciation of life, depending on, again, on me and on what he said. Sometimes there is a renewed appreciation of other losses as well, of, oh, the things I remembered, times I remembered, places I remembered that are gone. Those come up as part of sort of the life review that happens sometimes too. And it's like, oh yeah, I had kind of set that aside, and yet it's something I do want to spend more time with and honor. So it's been very valuable in a way of looking, not just at death, but at life. And as you say, of my life in the past and at where I want to go in the future. So I found it very valuable. I don't know if he has an awful lot online about it. Most of those are closed, but I think there's at least one, perhaps two, that's posted and recorded at the San Francisco Dharma Collective and his YouTube channel. I'll have to look to see if he's written anything about it. But I mean, as you say, there's a lot, this is very traditional, so there's a lot other places as well. But he's one of the people I know in the more contemporaneous Western Dharma movement who's, doing it very actively. And so I found it very valuable, and glad to hear your thoughts on it as well.
I think it's very valuable and very useful. I can share some of my own experience of how directly relevant a practice like this ultimately is at some time or another. As I say, unless a piano falls on you or something like that, you're going to encounter this. 13 years ago, almost exactly, I was told that I had upper motor neuron disease, that I would be in a wheelchair in a year, and that I would probably not live more than 5 years. Because of this practice, my response to that was, well, okay, yeah, I guess this is happening. And my mind turned to, all right, given that, what am I going to do now? I had a very healthy response to this news. And because of things since then, I've come to live more and more up in the way of always thinking of this. About 5.5 years ago, I guess it is, or is it 6.5? I'm not sure. I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And so I've lived with this every day. And everything I do every day and all the plans I make are always influenced by this knowledge that I don't know how many days I have left. Is this really what I want to do? And if it's not, what do I really want to do? So I'm so glad that I did these practices. And I promise you all, if you do this practice, the day is going to come where it takes on a meaning and importance, and you'll be so glad that you did it. Because I've seen how other people react to the news of their impending death. And I'm so glad that when my time came, that I had done these practices, because yeah, I didn't fall apart. I didn't desperately try to find a way for this not to be true. By the way, a year later, the ALS diagnosis, the upper motor neuron disease diagnosis, was turned over, and it was discovered that I had chronic Lyme disease. Not much better, but a little bit better, because at least there was a treatment, and at least some people did recover from it. which I did 7 years later. So, but I didn't react in the moment by, oh, I can't accept this. This can't be true. I have to do something about this. I didn't waste all that time and energy in that. It was like, okay, well, what do I do now? So you're going to really, the day is going to come when you're going to really appreciate having done these practices. So do them. Ricardo.
Action.
Yeah.
What do you think is there any value in Boga as part of this tuning? Did it in your
I don't think we can understand you. Maybe you could
Oh.
turn your video off for the moment and just leave your audio on.
do you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit better. Yes.
Well, let's so my question
I'm sorry, your internet connection is still going in and out.
Maybe he can use chat.
Yeah. I think Ricardo must be restarting his internet or something like that. Hopefully he'll be back soon and we'll be able to hear him. He's back.
Yes, you hear me?
That's much better so far. Keep talking.
Oh, okay, cool. Maybe I changed the place where I am in my house, so maybe that helps, I hope.
Yes.
Cool. So my question is a bit vague. The question is, do you think there's any value in entering Sambhogakaya for a practice to awakening? And did you use it in your own practice?
Well, isn't that what any of us would expect to be doing more and more often as we grow in wisdom and understanding?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yes. Whereas, I know that there are people who encourage that as a practice, and practice in the sense of being something that you do that helps you to get to that place of it really being there on its own. But my approach to it is, this kind of goes back to what I said earlier when we were talking about wisdom, direct knowledge, that there's a tendency of the mind to try to confabulate an understanding where there is not much. So my approach to things like that is that it's better off to let that develop as a result of all of the other practices that I do, rather than try to, and this is a very Vajrayana approach, you imagine yourself as having attained to a degree of wisdom that you haven't. You visualize a deity or some being that has these qualities that you aspire to. And as a part of that visualization is that those qualities come into you until eventually you get to a stage in your practice where you become the deity that you've been visualizing, in the sense that you now incorporate the qualities of that deity. So this is a very Vajrayana approach. And I chose to leave that aside and let that develop more organically and naturally, so that my mind didn't try. See, the more what I discovered about myself is the more my mind tries to understand and predict what wisdom is going to look and feel like, the harder it is for me to really see and feel that wisdom, because my own image of what it's going to be gets in the way. And that's what I tended to feel about the Vajrayana practices for me. Now, I'm not saying that they're not for other people, because they may be. I just know for me, I saw I had a problem with them.
Right. I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Anybody have anything else? Is there anything more you'd like to say about that, Ricardo? Or
No, not really. I mean, my encounters with the Sambhogakaya have been accidental as well.
yeah.
So, yeah. But I know some people use it as a tool, and I'm intrigued. Yeah.
Well, as long as it works for them, and I hope it does. So,
Yeah, I'm sure it does for some. I mean, there's many people in the world. Surely for some it works.
yeah, there are many different people, many different kinds of people, and I don't think those kind of practices would persist if they didn't work for enough people. So
Exactly. Yeah. So, something else I've been thinking about lately and wondering is that really sati and samadhi are like two different axes or dimensions of development. And even though in TMI there's like a certain path drawn on this two-dimensional space, and sometimes in TMI you refer to what happens when you kind of deviate from this drawn path. I think more and more in my experience I see that the two are not as much correlated as I thought they could be from reading TMI. Yeah.
Well, sati and samadhi are rooted in very different ways of knowing that we experience those two ways as attention and awareness. So the sati becomes, it goes from being simple awareness to being introspective awareness to becoming metacognitive awareness. I mean, it becomes metacognitive introspective awareness, and then in its full fruition, it just becomes metacognitive awareness. The samadhi aspect has to do with attention and developing stability of attention, clarity of attention, and then that penetrating power of attention that's called vipassana. And yes, in a two-dimensional construct, we can see there being a samadhi axis. Doesn't matter whether we make it horizontal or vertical, but its opposite at 90 degrees to it is the awareness axis. So just imagine you've got these two axes. As you move from ordinary attention to the different degrees of samadhi, eventually arriving at the highest samadhi, which is khanika, what you're doing is you're extending that axis. As you proceed from simple awareness to metacognitive awareness, you're extending that other axis. So each of those by themselves is one-dimensional. But what it does, the interaction between the two is all of the space between the two axes. And we should really do that. If we have them crossing like this, then we can see an expanding circle where both attention and awareness, both samadhi and sati, can play their roles to greater or lesser degrees. They don't both have to be at the end of the spectrum. If they do, that gives you the place where they kind of merge into a single way of knowing. But everywhere short of that, they're distinct and interacting with each other. And the more samadhi you have and the more sati you have, the bigger the space, this interactive space is that they can work. Picture that as a circle. You go from the origin 0 to +1, -1, and +1, -1. That defines a circle in which your overall mindfulness can operate. Then extend those axes through further development to +2 and -2 and +2. You have a much larger circle in which they can operate. So if we picture these things two-dimensionally, and we see that training attention increases one and training awareness increases the other, the result is a greatly enlarged sphere of consciousness and our ability to work productively within that. Out of that arises wisdom, direct knowledge, all of the other things that we talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Now we could, I won't, but we could extend this and add a third and even a fourth dimension to it, which is what happens when we start progressing through the different paths that the Buddha described. But
different what?
The Buddha described the different paths of awakening.
The path. Yeah, the four paths.
Yeah, right. So as we progress through those, we're adding progressively, it's like adding the Y dimension, the Y axis, and creating a third dimension, and adding yet another axis, which the mind has trouble visualizing 4 dimensions, but to the degree that you can, that also happens. So we can just add more dimensions as we further develop our capacity for an enhanced perspective on what's happening both internally and externally.
Yeah, and there's another dimension that is not independent, like sati and samadhi are independent, right? That's right. The idea of they being orthogonal. But there's one that's not independent, that is the unification of the mind.
Yes.
The unification of the mind depends on these two and maybe others as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could also think of the Noble Eightfold Path as each one being one dimension. Yes. But that it doesn't make sense to me so much yet. But with sati and samadhi, I feel it.
Yeah.
Like in particular, something that has been kind of a discovery for me is that mind wandering does not always feel the same. Mind wandering with awareness feels very different to mind wandering without awareness.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
That is one of the practices in stage 8, is to deliberately enter a state which you would have called mind wandering earlier, but which now is on purpose, with a mind that is attention that is very stable and awareness that is really powerful, and it's become something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So you are kind of well, not really. You're kind of dropping samadhi, but then you said you still have stable attention, so I'm not sure.
It's always there when you need it and want it.
Yeah.
but you're not, you're not under the compulsion to always make samadhi a part of your experience, nor are you constrained to always have it dominate. It can be there only to the degree that is helpful and no more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe we have ended up having a very good discussion today. I really like the topics that we've covered, and I hope you found them helpful as well. Maybe it's time to bring today's Q&A to a close, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. All right.
Thank you. See you.
See you soon.
See you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.